how do you start to shift that narrative so that like it isn't a conversation of everything needs to be incremental, everything needs to be revenue? Like, how do you make that transformation for others?
Yeah. And we do get that question. I'm not living in some utopia where like I don't have people asking me like the ROI, right? So a couple things I'll say on that front. One, consistency of the metrics and measuring those quarter over quarter and year over year. One other issue that I see a lot is people focusing in on time horizons that are too short. And so it's very noisy. Oh my gosh, it dropped yesterday. Y'all, yesterday was Saturday. Like, of course nobody's downloading your ebook on Saturday. Of course nobody's spending $1 million with you on Saturday. Like, it's Saturday, right? Or they'll literally pick like a date range, even week over week. That's real short. That's real short. Now, if you are doing, let's say, a big event, if you have launched a huge brand campaign, if you're on, you're on a billboard in Times Square and you want to see if direct traffic to the website or brand search is up. Cool. Looking at that the week after your billboard goes live in Times Square and doing a before and after, that's a really good way to be like, well, at minimum, more people have an idea that our name exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the first thing is choosing consistent metrics. I see this a lot where it's like, well, actually, this fiscal year, we're gonna measure this other thing. Well, actually, we're gonna change the definition of an
Yeah.
MQL. Okay, well, that's fair. You can't change the definition of an
Mm-hmm.
MQL every year and then be like, well, in 2023, we were doing way better. Where are we now? Were we? Right? So that's the first thing. Proper consistent metrics. Second thing, which is, I guess, 1A of that, is proper time horizons. And again, monthly, quarterly, biannually, annually, I think those are much more reasonable time horizons. If you have a program that is regularly changing. So if you have an email newsletter that goes out every single month, then sure, do your comparisons, monthly to understand what is your average of your open rate, CTR, CTOR. And then if something outperforms, if something underperforms, like if you're seeing a general upward trend in subscriber growth, but this month's subscriber growth tanked, let's maybe watch that and see, is it just because it was November and December? Like there's seasonality, right? So looking at the seasonality, looking at the trends year over year in the right time horizon with consistent metrics. That's one piece of this. I think the second piece of this, and this is controversial, but like go big or go zero. I think a lot of people, they think we're going to invest an incremental dollar and then we're going to see an incremental $1.25 or an incremental $1.10 or an incremental $1.50. That is very small increments. And particularly for an enterprise company that's doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue or $1 billion in revenue, right? You want to measure at the dollar level? No, dude. Either turn off an entire channel, turn it completely off for a quarter and see what happens. And of course, that's terrifying because like, wait, no, what if that's the one channel that actually works, right? Well, if you literally want me to attribute it to a single channel, start turning things off and let's see what happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if that's too scary, just in case it's working, go hard in a channel. Go spend $5, $10, $20 million on an out-of-home campaign and see what happens, right? Like invest in double the amount of trade shows you do and double the amount of investment per trade show, right? If you normally spend $20,000 for booth space and a sponsorship, 5X's, spend $100,000. See what happens, right? But this idea of like, well, last year we did a 10 by 10 booth and we did like the little, flyer sponsor. So this year we're going to do a 10 by 20 booth and a lanyard sponsor. And we want to know exactly how many additional leads we got. Cool. So you went from 25K spend to 30K spend, and you don't understand why that's not driving millions of extra dollars in pipeline. Cool, right? And again, I recognize that I am coming from a context where we have the ability to actually do that level of go big or go home amount. And I think that's part of why I say it that way, because like I've seen it. We have done some really go big campaigns, and we can see the impact of that because it was such a shift in the investment that the before and after is obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Even in smaller companies, I've seen that a little bit, but that's what I would say is like, okay, if people really genuinely actually want to know, turn it completely off or triple, quadruple, 5x down on it. But this little like onesie twosie optimization, oh, we're going to experiment. Instead of just doing an A/B test on our subject line, we're going to do an ABC test on our subject line. Y'all, are you even getting statistically significant audience sizes at that size, right? By the time you segment it down that way.
Yeah. Lots of hot thoughts on A/B testing for subject line there, but I love your point about like this not just being really good advice for enterprise teams, because the proponents of incrementality who aren't big fans of MTA, like they say something similarly, because like some of the drawbacks I bring up about incrementality and everything needs to be an experiment is that in startups, you don't have large sample size. Like Atlassian has incredible traffic and they can do really fun things with really small changes with stat sig. But in like startups, like you're barely getting any traffic. Like email experiments aren't a thing because click-through rates are in the 1%. Like what is the value of that? But their counterpoints are just like the experimentation you should be doing in startups should be big bets, like big ideas, doubling down, tripling down, 10xing on something to see like big lifts. Because once you have a big lift, then it doesn't matter how small or big the sample size was if the lift was big enough, right? So anyways, it was really interesting to get your thoughts on there.